Canadian government will now match the United States by removing all of Canada's tariffs on U.S. goods.
What you just heard was a statement that shocked both economists and global markets. Canada's Prime Minister has officially confirmed the removal of Canadian tariffs on U.S. goods, an announcement that signals a dramatic shift in trade relations. But to understand how we reached this moment, we need to go back to the beginning of these tense negotiations.
Throughout our negotiations with the United States on a new trade and security relationship, the objectives of Canada's new government have been constant. First, to protect Canadian workers and their families. Second, to reinforce the competitiveness of Canadian businesses. And thirdly, to build the strongest economy in the G7.
From the very start, Canada's position was clear: protect jobs, strengthen competitiveness, and ensure long-term economic growth. But across the border, the United States was rewriting its entire trade playbook. Washington wasn't simply negotiating deals, it was fundamentally transforming how the world accessed the American market.
This new U.S. trade policy has several motivations: to raise tariff revenues, to protect strategic industries, to encourage foreign investment in the United States, and to change trade and non-trade policy in U.S. partners. And to these ends, the United States has announced a series of trade actions.
What followed was a wave of aggressive measures. At the start of the year, Washington imposed AIPA tariffs on Canada and Mexico, citing concerns over border security and fentanyl trafficking. Quickly after, a series of reciprocal tariffs swept across nearly every U.S. trade partner. Strategic industries like steel, aluminum, autos, and copper were hit hardest. Canada's lumber industry also found itself directly in the crosshairs.
Now, in recent weeks, the United States has agreed a series of trade deals with a variety of countries. And these deals have several aspects in common. First, baseline tariffs that cover a broad range of goods and services that are substantially higher than those U.S. tariffs that existed before. In fact, the average U.S. tariff rate on the world has jumped from just over 2% at the end of last year to almost 16%, 8 times higher.
That statistic alone tells the story. In just 1 year, the average U.S. tariff rate skyrocketed from a mere 2% to nearly 16%. Countries that once enjoyed near frictionless access to the American consumer market suddenly found themselves paying a heavy price. And for industries like autos and steel, there was little to no relief. As America tightened its grip, a new reality began to emerge. Access to the U.S. economy was no longer based on free trade principles. It had to be bought. Countries were now expected to pay through tariffs, foreign investment promises, and even domestic policy changes.
Specifically, under the new U.S. approach, countries must now buy access to the world's largest economy through a combination of tariffs, investments, unilateral trade liberalization, and policy changes in their home markets.
Canada refused to stay silent. In response, Ottawa imposed its own retaliatory tariffs, designed to shield Canadian workers and pressure Washington into a compromise. Few other nations dared to follow this path, but Canada's stance was firm.
Now, as in previous trade disputes, Canada has implemented a series of retaliatory tariffs. Their objectives have been to protect Canadian workers and businesses, and to incentivize a negotiated settlement with the United States.
That pressure finally paid off. Earlier this month, the United States reaffirmed a critical part of the Free Trade Agreement, COSMA. In simple terms, Canadian exports that meet COSMA standards would be spared from America's harsh new tariffs.
As a result of that decision by the United States, the actual U.S. tariff rate on Canadian goods is 5.6%. Compare that to the 16% global average. That remains the lowest amongst all of the United States trading partners. And more than 85% of Canada-U.S. trade is now tariff-free.
This was a breakthrough. While most countries were hit with crippling costs, Canada secured a unique advantage. With an average tariff of just 5.6% and more than 85% of trade flowing without barriers, Canada had the best deal with the world's largest economy.
So let's be absolutely clear. Canada currently has the best trade deal with the United States. And while it's different from what we had before, it is still better than that of any other country.
It was a bold statement, one that highlighted Canada's resilience in the face of sweeping American protectionism. But the story did not end there. Ottawa was preparing for the next phase, strengthening CUSMA and forging a new kind of trade and security partnership with its southern neighbor.
In this context, and consistent with Canada's commitment to CUSMA, I'm announcing today that the Canadian government will now match the United States by removing all of Canada's tariffs on U.S. goods specifically covered under CUSMA.
And with that announcement, Canada signaled a turning point. The retaliatory measures were gone. In their place stood a renewed partnership, one that could redefine the economic future of North America.
If you found this breakdown helpful and want to stay updated on more global shifts in trade and politics, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and join us for the next analysis.